Okay, so you've got GNS3 installed. Now what? This video is going to show you how to use GNS3. We're going to talk about how to create appliances on our project workbench, and we're going to learn about how to drag some shapes and put some notes on here and make connections and even interact with the devices. So let's get started. So if we have GNS3 open, I'm going to take your attention first to our left-hand toolbar, and this is where we can sift through all devices, security devices, end devices, host devices, switches, and routers. Now before I can do anything, I've got to create a project. I've got this window saying please create a project, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go to File, and I can create a new blank project. Now the default project name is always untitled, and if I try to create, if I look here under recent projects, I already have untitled. If I try to create untitled again, it says it already exists and crash. It doesn't even give me the option to rename it, so I will have to make my project something else. So I will just call this example. And once I have my project created, now notice my background goes white. This is kind of my project workbench type of area. So now let's bring some devices over. So I'm just going to list all devices, and we will start with a router. And I will bring two switches up. I double clicked it and it brought me up to the configuration. Let me just bring a couple of switches over, and then I will bring over some Alpine Linux command line Linux terminals. So now that I have all of my devices on my workbench, next thing I want to do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to start all of my nodes, because these are actually virtual machine starting. They will take a few minutes to boot up and get you into the window. So step 2 is always start your devices. I've got all my devices. They're going to start. And while they're starting, I'm going to go ahead and now kind of get my devices in a neat order. I can zoom in here on my devices because I've got a smaller lab, make it a little bit easier to see. And then I will go ahead and create some links. So for that, I can use the Add Link tool. And I'll click on a device, select the interface, and then click on the device I want to connect it to. And I'll just keep clicking and clicking until I have connections between all of the devices. So all my devices are connected, and now I'll turn off my link tool so I can get my pointer back. I can move stuff around to make it look a little bit neater just by clicking and dragging the devices around. And now the next step is I have my connections, but I can't see them. Well, that's what this tool up here is for. Show hide interface labels. So let's turn the interface labels on, and they're in a general spot, but you can click and drag and move them around. Now the next thing I want to do is on any lab, I always put my IP addresses right on the devices. If I try to read IP addresses from a lab and then I go over to configure it, it gets confusing, especially if addresses are in tables and stuff like that. I always like to have the addresses right here on there, and it's pretty simple to do. So I've got a note tool. I'm just going to click that, and now I can start typing 192.168.1.1/24, and that'll be the IP address for this machine. And I can go ahead, do another note tool, 192.168.1.1, and I'll continue to do this. One thing I can do is I can duplicate a note. So if I just right click and duplicate it, now I can drag this over here, and then I can right click and check text edit, and then I can make that A2. And notice here I have the option to change the color, I can change the font, and I can even rotate it. So I'll hit apply there, okay, and now let me just duplicate this one, and I'll come over here and make that 2.12. So I've got my devices started. I've got a clear understanding of what interfaces have what IP addresses and what devices, what IP addresses go to what devices. Now I want to do a little bit more. I want to put some shapes on here to really help differentiate groupings of devices. You can do this with other network protocols, routing protocols, stuff like that. It's very helpful to have your devices grouped so you can really understand what's going on. So I'm going to create a square, and let me create a second square. I'm just going to click on the square tool. I click on my workbench, it creates a square, and then I can click and resize these. Actually, it's a rectangle tool, but I can click and resize them. So I'm going to create 2 rectangles. And as you can see, my rectangles are sitting on top of my device tools. So we're going to have to do something about that. So I've created my 2 rectangles. And that helps me identify which devices are on which networks and stuff. And now if I right click on the rectangle, I can lower it 1 layer. And I can keep lowering it until it's at the bottom of my plan. Well, this is great, but now I have these borders. And you see how the border kind of interferes with some of my text, so I want to get rid of that. One thing I like to do is I like to click on, right click on the style, and I can add a fill color. So in this one I'll use just light green. And that's my fill color. And I can change the border color. One way I could try to remember this and make my border the same color as my fill and apply it. And now I don't have a black border because my border is the same color as my fill color. Another way you can do this is how I like to do it. If I go to my style tool, I will select my fill color. This one I'll make like this light blue. Click OK. Now if I click apply, it's going to apply that fill color there. Now when I go to border color, I can just click pick screen color and boom. Click on that screen color and that's going to be my border now. Click pick screen color. Move my cursor to that screen color. Notice as I move it around my right here it changes. So I'll just click right there. And then I can click OK. And then I can click OK again. And now I've got my border colors. So the last thing I want to look at is I've got my devices on the map. This is probably not the best color to use because my green dots blend right in. I could change that to yellow if I wanted to, but for right now that's fine. Now the next thing I want to do is go connect to all the devices. There's a couple of ways I can do that. I can right click and I can console to a device individually, or I can just go up here to this tool and this will allow me to console connect to all devices. So let me start that. And it's created. I've already done this once, so let me bring this over onto the screen. I've consoled into them once and then I consoled into them again. So if we're just demonstrating this, let me unclick, close all of these, and we'll demonstrate this again. So let me just close everything so we get a fresh start. So now I'll click console to all devices. So now I've got a console connection to all of my devices. They should have started and booted up right now, and like switch 1, switch 2. If I hit my enter key, I'll get a prompt. I'm hitting enter to get my prompt information. I've got my Linux terminals. I don't need that overview tab. I've got all my devices, and now I can go ahead and enter the command line and make configuration changes. So anyway, I hope this has helped you with the use of GNS3, and thanks for watching.